A special thanks to my Patreon supporters. What is the scariest/creepiest thing you have seen/heard? I was on vacation, in Ithaca with my boyfriend, at the time. We had literally, I'm talking 10 minutes, just gotten into town, and stopped at a suspension bridge near Cornell's campus. I'm terrified of heights, and so my boyfriend was coaxing me, step by step over the bridge. It was gorgeous and we stopped at the middle, to take a picture. On the side we had come from, there was a parking lot with steps leading to the bottom of the gorge, but on the far side, there were hiking paths with no barrier. A woman walked past me and offered to take a picture. We declined and she smiled and walked quickly, to the far side of the bridge, where she smoothly jumped off into the gorge. There was not a second of hesitation, it was almost like she expected the path to keep going. The sound of a person hitting the ground from a jump like that, sticks with you. I was playing around with a radio once when I was a kid, just slowly spanning through the static, trying to find a station. I had found an old television antenna, attached it to the side of our house, and ran a wire out my window to it with an alligator clip, attached to the radio antenna, allowing me to get a way broader range of signals. So I'm sitting there, early in the morning, like 2 a.m., slowly sweeping frequencies, and suddenly I get to this station that's playing this very weird crackling sound. It sounded sort of like cracking knuckles, or maybe Rice Krispies cereal, but with a fixed, rhythmic pattern instead of being random. I sat there, listening to it for a second, then it suddenly stopped and this faint voice says, "It doesn't work. We're already dead. We're already dead." It took a second for the weight of the words to hit me, but when they did I freaked the F out, and almost threw the radio across the room. I'm pretty sure it was just someone messing around with a radio transmitter, but damn if it didn't scare the shucks out of me at the time. My parents bought their first house back in 1972. It was a fixer-upper, but they decided to move in right away, and fix things as time/money permitted. Within a few days of moving in, the new neighbors came over to introduce themselves. They also let my parents know that the previous owners had moved out after a nasty divorce. They had lost their second baby from SIDS, and their relationship went downhill from there. My parents were horrified, more so because they were newly pregnant, and couldn't imagine going through such a thing. They eventually pretty much forgot all about it. Life went on. They were in love with their new life and their new house. In preparation for the baby, they decided to wallpaper the nursery. Now, my dad told my mom there was no need in wallpapering the inside of the closet, but she insisted. She was kneeling down, scraping off old paint inside of the closet when her eyes fell upon something that made her blood turn to ice. Written in crayon, at about eye level for a kindergartner, in childish scrawl was, "I killed the baby." Well, I'll never forget this one. My wife and I used to live in a townhome that backed to some woods. We both took off work one day to get some things done in the yard, cutting the grass, weeding our large flower beds, laying mulch, etc. Our yard wasn't big, it took about 2 full grass clipping bags. I would walk a couple of feet into the woods, and dump them in a pile. As I'm walking back to empty the second bag, something in the middle of the woods catches my eye. Something out of place, and it's moving. I crouched down to get a better look, and I just froze. At first, I could make out a pair of shoes just swaying back and forth, and then was able to see the legs and body of a teenager. There in the middle of the woods was a teenage boy who had hung himself. Next to the tree, I could see a skateboard leaning up against it. I yelled for my wife to call the police, and started running back to try and save him, but he was gone. His body was limp, and his head was just slumped over. His dark scruffy hair was slowly blowing in the breeze. The cops came and quickly cut him down and they were gone. As it turns out, he was having problems getting along with his parents, and this is what he decided to do. Woke up one night around 1 a.m., heard the shower was on. I first thought it was my brother. He works night shifts, so thought he had came home late and was in the shower. It went on for about half an hour until I got up and went to see WTF he was doing. No one was in the shower, my brother wasn't home yet, I was the only one in the house. Still to this day, I have no idea how it turned on or who did it. Almost 5 years later I still think about it and shit myself. Even writing this now, I feel like turning every light on in the house. Why do I do this to myself? When I was 7, I woke up in the middle of the night with an earache. I decided to tell my mom and stepdad and walked out of my room. Someone was sitting on the chair in the living room, about 3 feet away from my bedroom door. The person looked strange. The face was just kind of distorted, but it was dark and I couldn't see well. "Mom?" I asked. The person shook their head, and I started getting scared. "Mike?" The person shook their head again. I decided the best course of option was to go back to bed so I wouldn't have to walk past this person. I climbed in bed, and closed my eyes for a second, before opening them and seeing the person standing in my doorway, smiling madly and nodding furiously. Edited, I screamed at the top of my lungs and closed my eyes. My stepdad came running out of his room, in his underwear with a baseball bat. That was a scary sight in itself. There was nothing there, but clothes my mom had folded and put on the chair were strewn about the living room. For the longest time, I told myself it was my cat, sitting on the clothes. My dad died of cancer, the day I turned 16, after about 2 weeks in a coma. It was really fast, less than 2 months between diagnosis and death. He died in the house. We had a hospice attendant and my mom was very good about seeing to him in those final days. Anyway, a lot of weird shit happened after he passed, but the one that still freaks me out when I think about it, happened about 12 hours before he took to bed, for the last time. He was in our living room, napping on the couch while my mom was in the kitchen cooking. No one else was home. Suddenly, he jerked awake and was shouting for my mom in a very loud, agitated voice. Clearly angry with her. "Beverly! Don't do that. Don't ever do that again." She ran into the room, alarmed, and asked what he was talking about, and he said, "Don't do that. Don't walk past me like that in that long, black wig." Sometimes I think he saw death. My old coworker had a son that was in his mid-30s, and he had a son named Hunter, that was 4 or 5. She said that Hunter would have bad dreams and that he would sleep with his dad when he got scared. One night, his dad woke up because he heard Hunter calling him. But he was calling him by his name, not by dad. So he went to his room, and he was asleep. He woke him up and said, "Hunter, you were calling me. Is everything okay?" And Hunter said, "Dad, when they call you you're not supposed to answer," and fell back asleep. He asked him about it in the morning, but he said he didn't remember saying it. I get chills when I think about it. To really get my story you have to have an understanding of my 3rd floor landing. There's a single set of stairs that lead up to it. Once on the landing it's a T-shape, with an office to the left, my bedroom to the right, and straight ahead is a bathroom with a shower. Anyway, one night, around 10 p.m., I'm taking a shower before I head to sleep. The glass panels on my shower is that like concave/convex glass that blurs everything, so everything was blurred and unclear. I glance at the door, and I see some kind of hand-like figure. Now, it was pitch black, so right there it freaked me out because I come from a family of pale white Welsh people. What freaked me out more was how the hand seemed to come through the door, or at least an angle where whomever the hand belonged to would be visible. All it did was hit the lights. That's it. No noise, no attack or anything, it just turned off the FNG lights. So there I am, I just witnessed a phantom hand, and now I'm in my shower and it's pitch fucking black. I've never been so chilled to the bone before, something about being in the darkness of the night, with the only noise being the water hitting the floor beneath me, just reduced me to the most primal state of pure fear I've ever been in. I eventually get myself to leave the shower and hit the lights. The relief that came over me was immense. I've never been able to explain it. The stairs up to the landing are old and creak like hell. I would have heard someone come and go down. No one was in my room, or the office. Weirder still, nothing like it has happened since. I'm a journalist, and was told this doozy by a woman I interviewed for a true crime story. When this woman was a young girl, say 8 years old, she started to come downstairs at night to tell her father that there was a man in her closet. He tells her there's no such thing as the boogeyman and sends her back to bed. This happens on and off for like a week. Finally, he gets frustrated and walks her back to the room and says, "I'll show you there's nothing in your closet," and goes to open the door. It opens an inch and then he feels someone slam it shut. Turns out there really was a man in her closet. This guy was a perv who would come into the house every night and stare at the girl from the closet while she slept. The dad kicked the shit out of him and the perv went to prison for many years. I researched her story 20 years after this happened. The guy had just gotten out of jail again and no one could find him. I've been on a tour at an old prison and some of the scariest stuff I've ever experienced has happened there. I'm not convinced in ghosts and whatnot, but if there are, they're definitely there. Every other person who works there has their own creepy story. My scariest was when I had a group of about 30 people in the Gallows one night, the room where people were hanged, and the room is made of corrugated tin, so I was there doing my bit, when suddenly there was this huge bang on the roof. Everyone looked up, and a few people screamed, but a lot laughed. We have a few actors that jump out on tours, so they probably thought it was that. The banging didn't stop though, it was kind of irregular, at sort of like half-second intervals, and people we getting creeped, me included. So I took the group outside. Now the roof of the room is a slanted frame, so if you walk back a bit, you can see the outside roof. We all watched as this one bit of tin looked like it was being stomped on, from the outside, moving and everything, still banging when I took the group to the next spot. We finished off the tour, and a few people thought it was a joke, but it genuinely terrified me. I've got some ghost photos on my Galaxy phone. I'll try and upload now, but I'm not very good at interneting. My cousin had a child about 8 years ago. My great-grandmother, very beloved woman, all-around great person. My grandma Shaver passed away while his wife was pregnant, and only about 2 weeks before she was due. This was a big deal for a few reasons. My cousin would have been the first of his generation in my mother's side of the family to have a child, therefore would have been my grandma Shaver's first great-great-grandchild. 5 generations alive at the same time, it would have been pretty cool. But she passed away from a stroke and it was very tragic. Fast forward a couple of years. My cousin and his wife are showing their daughter family pictures, she's approximate 3 to 4 years old at the time. Asking her, "Who's this?" and seeing if she remembers names of aunts, uncles, grandma/grandpa etc. They sort of skip over a pic of my grandma Shaver, and she puts her hand on the pic and says, "That's Grandma Shaver." My cousin said he was a bit uncomfortable, but asked, "Do you remember hearing us talk about her?" And according to him, his daughter looked him right in the eyes and said, "No, but she visits me and talks to me all the time." He said he didn't sleep right for a few weeks. Good thing we're all sure if she is a ghost, she is probably the most kind gentle ghost there is. Still, creeped me out. TLDR, baby born 2 weeks after beloved great-grandmother dies, 3 years later, child knows her name from seeing her picture and says she talks to her and visits her, despite knowing nothing about her. A few years ago, I was driving back to my house from a friend's about 2 a.m. I was getting close to my house, in a really rural area with corn fields on both sides of the road. All of a sudden I saw stalks of corn blocking my path, going straight across the road from one field from another. Nobody is around, no cars, no houses, just my headlights shining on upright corn stalks standing across the road, as thick as the fields to either side. I knew I wasn't lost or anything. I drove home this way every day, and stopped the car on the road, just staring at the corn stalks trying to figure out what the fuck to do. After sitting there for a minute, I decided that staring at the corn waiting for something to happen was much scarier than doing something. So I hit the gas, hoping the corn would just fall down in front of my small car. It was one of the strangest feelings driving through the corn. I imagine it is what it would feel like to run through platform 9 March 4th for Harry Potter. 1 second I was staring at what seemed to be a solid field of corn, and the next my car is easily knocking the stalks over and I was through. The rows of corn across the road weren't as deep as I had thought, and in no time I was on the other side looking in the rear-view mirror at a wall of corn with a now gaping hole in it. Went home, went to bed still freaked out. The next morning I went to leave, drove down the same road. And the only sign of the corn was a few stalks lying next to the road. I still have no idea how that happened.